Welcome back to episode 2 of Mind Mysteries. So, how did we do on the last test, right? How many words were you able to get on that first episode? So, if you didn't get them all, don't worry because that was just the first episode. And I'm going to continually keep training you so that you're able to get better at making associations so that you can learn anything you want in record time. Now, with that said, today I'm going to give you a bigger challenge, okay? The words that I'm going to give you today are going to be truly random. That's going to make this test a lot harder. But don't worry, because by the end of it, you're going to be able to memorize really random information, okay? So what I want you to do is that I really want you to engage with me, okay? Set aside 30 minutes. You're not going to regret, taking the time to do this because you are going to use this for the rest of your life. Now, what I'm going to do for you is that I'm going to play you a little portion of my memory program, okay? So I'm going to pause here for a moment and I'm going to play you that portion because it goes perfectly well with the first episode, okay? So I'm going to play that for you now. I'm going to give you 10 random words. Try your very best to memorize those words. And if it doesn't go well, don't worry, because then I'm going to break down a new memory technique that's going to help you improve your memory immediately. Okay? So let's get into that now. I'm going to play for you now that little portion. I'll see you at the end. Okay, with that said, let's get started with your next brain challenge. Are you ready? This time, I'm going to give you a list of 10 truly random words. And they're only 10 words. This test is going to be a lot harder than the one before. But I want you to do the best you can. And again, you have to memorize these words in the order that I give them to you. And you know the rules. Don't listen to the audio twice. You only get one chance. So make sure that they are no distractions and that you're ready to memorize these words. Okay, this is going to be a lot harder. Just try your very best. Here are the 10 words. Number 1, fire hydrant. The word after that is balloon. Notice that this list is a lot harder to make those associations. The next word is batteries. And now I want you to memorize the word barrel. And the word after that I want you to memorize is board. And after that I want you to memorize diamond. And now I want you to memorize Sir Lancelot. And yes, this list is a lot harder, right? The next word is mask. The one after that is toothpaste. And the final one is sign. Okay, now what I want you to do is pause this class and I want you to write down as many words as you remember. If you get stuck on one, that's okay. Just move on to the next one. So go ahead and pause this class. I'll be right here. Take the test. And again, this is just a baseline. Not because you know basic association doesn't mean you're a memory expert now. I'll be back with you in a couple of seconds. Hit pause now. Okay, welcome back. So how did we do? How many did you remember? It's okay if you just got 1, 2, 3, maybe 4. Remember, it's okay to make mistakes here. I am going to teach you how to memorize this new list of words forwards and backwards as I did before, this much more complicated list. And what we're going to do right now is not just a really cool party trick to impress your friends. It's also a great exercise to develop your brain. Now, I want you to see and notice which were the words that you remembered. Let's do this list together now and understand why you will remember certain words, why will you forget other types of words. We're going to explore all of that, and then we're going to do the list together. So the first thing that I want you to understand is that there's a reason why our brains remember certain things and forget others. So before I give you another challenge, I want you to understand why we forget. And once you understand why we forget, I think that you're going to come to the realization of knowing that there's no such thing as a good memory or a bad memory. So let's dive in right now and understand your brain. Let's understand how it loves to learn. Let's talk about how it likes to connect the information. And once you understand this, you're going to be like, oh my God, no wonder I couldn't memorize that list. But once you know these memory principles, you're going to be like, oh my God, that list was so easy. Can you give me more words? But you're only going to get better if you understand these natural brain principles. Let's go through them one by one. First, let me ask you, which words did you remember from the last list that I gave you? And why do you think you remember those words out of the others? Let's do the first one. The first one was hydrant. So if you remember fire hydrant, my question for you is why? Why do you think you remember the word fire hydrant? And you might be thinking, well, because it was, I don't know, the first word you gave me, right? It was at the beginning. Well, it turns out that that's a natural memory principle. You don't need a course, you don't need training to make your brain remember things that happen at the beginning. We call this in brain science primacy. It's going to be very important because when we understand how our brains love to learn, we are going to create tools to maximize the way that it learns. You see? So this first natural principle of how you learn is called primacy. It's like when you go to a party and you meet 20 strangers. What happens? Well, you're more likely to remember the people that you meet at the beginning, right? The people you first meet. Or if I gave you a list of 20 numbers or 20 words, you'll probably remember the first words because they were simply at the beginning. So, what other words do you remember? Some of you might have remembered the word sign. Why will you remember the word sign? And you're probably thinking, well, maybe it's because, I don't know, it was the last word. And you're absolutely correct again, because we tend to remember the last things or the most recent things. This principle is called recency. So again, if you go to that same party and you meet 20 people, you're more likely to remember the people at the beginning with primacy and the people at the end with recency. Okay, let's go into what other words you might have remembered. And some people might be thinking, I don't know, Phoenix, all I remember is that you kept repeating the letter B. Like it was like be this, be that, meaning that I kept repeating the B sound, right? So there was words like balloon, battery, barrel, board, and the B just kept repeating itself over and over. Why do you think you would remember a few of those B words? Well, it's because they were organized, right? We call this principle chunking, and it's going to be extremely important when we're learning new languages and when we're organizing information that we learn from books or seminars or any type of information. It's going to be crucially important for you to understand how to chunk down the information. In other words, how to organize the information. Because we tend to remember information better if it's organized. So for example, if I gave you a list of 20 words that are disorganized, you will have a lot harder time remembering all of them rather than if I gave you a list of 5 colors, 5 countries, 5 capitals, 5 vegetables. You see? You're more likely to remember a shorter list of words that's categorized rather than a large scrambled list of information. That's just how your brain works. So, what other words do you remember? What other words? Is there any other?
For some of you, you might think, I don't know, I think I remember there was like a diamond or something in there. Let's take a deeper look into why you would remember the word diamond from that list. Well, it's because there was emotions tied to it, right? For some people, diamonds hold value and memories, right? We tend to remember things that are emotional for us. So, for future tests, you need to make your images emotional. You need to make them mean something because we tend to remember things that touch us emotionally. That's why I mentioned that. And we're going to become masters of combining emotions with categories and associations. And by blending all of those things together, you are going to have a much better memory. Now, what other words do you remember? Do you remember the word Sir Lancelot? That was so weird, right? That word. Sir Lancelot, in case you don't know, is a famed swordsman. And if you remember that one, it's simply because it was different. We remember things that stand out. We remember things that are unique. And that is another principle of memory. So in future tests, when I'm asking you to create the images, I don't just want you to see the images. I want you to imagine the images in a unique way. And this is very important because there's something about making your images different and unique that helps you turn the information unforgettable. Later on in a future day, we're going to be counting in Japanese. I'm going to teach you hundreds of words in Spanish and other languages. And you're going to notice how I make the learning experience unique. I make the associations of the words very unique and fun and emotional. But I'm only doing all of that because I understand that this is the way our brains learn, you see? And so what I'm doing is, because I know how the brain loves to learn, we're just using advanced techniques that maximize that, you see? Okay, let's go with another word. Do you remember the word toothpaste? Now, why do you think you would remember a word as boring as toothpaste? Why would that even stick out in your memory? It isn't really unique. There's nothing really emotional about it. So for the few of you that remembered that word, I want to ask you, why do you think you remember that word? Well, it's because we tend to remember things that are familiar to us. You know, if you're brushing your teeth 2 or 3 times a day, you're more likely to remember that. You're likely to remember things that are familiar to you. When you meet someone and they have the name of a relative of yours, right? Like the same name, it's much easier to remember that. And so one of the things that we're going to be practicing in this program is, how do we take information that's extremely complex, like numbers and foreign languages, and how can we turn that into something that's familiar? We forget most of what we learn. We have to come to the realization that most of the information that we encounter, if it's like complicated or foreign, we're not going to remember it. We need to actively turn that information into something that's familiar to us. And we're going to be practicing that in future days. You're going to see how I memorize so many numbers and formulas and complex information. So like if you tell me, hey, what's number 43 or 42 or 61, all of the numbers, they're not just numbers for me anymore. I have a system to turn information into something that's familiar to me. And I'm going to teach you how to do that. So the next time that I give you another complicated list of words, you're going to be a master at turning things familiar to you. And when you turn things that are more familiar to you, you're just going to be a lot better at learning. You're going to save a lot of time. You're going to save a lot of energy while everybody else is like struggling to like learn foreign languages or learn new information. It's going to be a breeze to you. You're going to be like, well, I have to turn it into a picture. So let me see what tools I can use to make great associations. And that's what we do. That's a natural memory principle. turn things into something that's familiar to you. Okay, next word. Some of you might have remembered the word mask. Why would we remember the word mask? Well, it's because we're not very good at remembering abstract things. So if I gave you a list of feelings and abstract words, you're going to have a really hard time remembering that. Like if I told you, hey, remember the word happy and fearful and, like abstract things like that, you're going to struggle. You remember things much easier if it's like in an image. Like, hey, remember a ball, remember a chair, remember a mask. So that's another natural memory principle. Your best memory is your visual memory. Yes, there's auditory and there's kinesthetic and all these other types of memories, but make no mistake, visual memory is your best memory. Okay, when I ask you, hey, think of an elephant or think of this or remember that or can you remember your school? You are going to visually see it in your mind. So the words that I gave you on this list, they were easy to visualize. That's why you were able to remember them. It's because they were easy to visualize. So we're going to take advantage of that later when we're learning, again, languages and when we're learning how to read books, and we want to use techniques to not forget the information in those books. We need to have a formula. We need to have a way to turn things from the abstract to things that are visual. You see? Alrighty, I have one more natural memory principle to teach you. Is there anything else you might have remembered from the list? Maybe you were one of the people that started trying to connect the information. So maybe you were trying to connect the batteries with the barrel somehow, make like a little story or something. Well, that actually has a name. It's called the link method. Other people call it the story method. And that's when you link two pieces of information together with a story. And this is the final and only way that we really memorize information. So we have things that are emotional, we have primacy, we have recency, all these things that we just mentioned. And the final one is story. We need to turn things into a story to be able to memorize them. So that's what we're going to do today. So on day number 2, I want to show you a brand new technique called the story method. And what you and me are going to do right now is that we're going to go through the same list of words that I gave you, but we're going to do it together. And we're not going to use basic association because clearly that did not help us. We're going to use this new tool, the story method. And you and me together, we're going to memorize this list in such a fun and easy way, it will blow your mind. You're going to be like, oh my God, like that is so easy. Okay, so let's do it together and pay very careful attention because I'm going to test you again after we go through it together. Are you ready? Make sure that there are no distractions. We're going to go through this just once together and you're going to be able to memorize it. Okay, so be very active and engage in everything that I tell you. All right, here we go. So I am going to ask you to visualize a fire hydrant in front of you because that was the first word. So you visualize the fire hydrant, but you put a color into it. So do that now. See a fire hydrant and put your favorite color on it. Maybe it's red, maybe it's blue, maybe it's pink. Whatever color it is, remember, you need to create an unforgettable image. And the way to do that is to stack it up with all of these associations. Okay, so visually, really see the fire hydrant in your mind. Have you done so? Good. Now, the second word that I gave you was balloon. Okay, so now we have to connect this information to be able to memorize it. How can we connect the fire hydrant and the balloon? Well, what I want you to visualize is that I want you to imagine thousands and thousands of helium balloons tied to the fire hydrant. You see? And there's so many balloons that it is beginning to lift and rip the fire hydrant from the ground. Okay, so it's ripping it, and now water starts splashing everywhere. Okay, so now the fire hydrant is floating up into the air because it's being carried by all of these balloons. So you see what I did there? I took two words that are harder to memorize and I connected them together with a story. And I'm using a couple of the natural memory principles that we just talked about. I'm making it unique, I'm making it fantastical, and I am making it unforgettable. Now let me ask you, what color are the balloons? Because you need to keep adding associations. Now, because I'm explaining this, it takes a lot more time. But when you get good at this, you will be able to, in a split second, create associations like this. Like if you give me a list of like 10 words, I just need a handful of seconds to memorize the entire list, and I will be able to make a crazy story with it. Okay, so please keep in mind that because I'm teaching you this, it takes a lot longer to understand the concept and do it together. But once you get good at this, you will be able to do this lightning fast. Okay, so we have the fire hydrant, and the fire hydrant is being picked up by these balloons. Now, the next word that I gave you were batteries. How can we connect that story? We need to continue this story of association. How do we do that? How are we going to connect the balloons and batteries? There's always a way, okay? And in a future class, I'm going to give you all of the tools that I have to come up with images and just be more creative. But for now, I'll do it for you. So what I would visualize is batteries inside of the balloons. And then I visualize the balloons are popping in midair. Okay, so we have thousands of balloons in the sky, and now they're starting to pop everywhere. And the batteries, because they're inside of the balloon, they start falling from the sky. So everyone's like running away because, there's batteries. And if that thing hits you in the head, it's going to hurt, right? So everyone's like hiding, trying to take cover because all of these batteries are falling from the sky. So now I have 3 words. I have fire hydrant, balloon, and batteries. Now, you know what I told you before. You need to make as many associations as you can. 3 to 6 is fantastic. So what I want you to do is use your visual memory too and tell yourself, okay, what brand are the batteries, right? What brand are they? So I want you to visualize that now with me. See the brand of the battery. Good. Okay, so the next word that I gave you was a barrel. How are you going to memorize that, right? How are you going to connect batteries with barrel? That seems kind of difficult. Well, it's actually super easy. It's extremely easy once you've practiced making all of these crazy images. What I would visualize is that there's barrels on the floor, but they're alive. Okay? They have eyes, they have ears, they have mouths. Like the barrels are alive and they're talking. And so the barrels, they start chasing the batteries falling from the sky, and the barrels start like catching them. Okay? So the barrels have little legs too. And when the batteries are falling, the barrels are catching them all. And you hear the sound of the batteries hitting the barrels because that's an auditory association. Now you're hearing the story. So I want you to feel the story. I want you to see the story. I want you to smell the story. You see, the more associations, the better. Because I'm explaining it, it's taking me a lot of minutes, but once you understand the concept, you do it in a split second. Okay, so doing an association between 2 words, that should take like 5 seconds. And that's like a lot. You see what I mean? Especially when you practice. I'm able to do it now like in a split second or 2. But it's because I've practiced it so much. But anyway, we have 4 words now. We have the fire hydrant, And what happens to the fire hydrant? What was it getting picked up on? The balloons, right? And then the balloons popped. And what came out of the balloons? The batteries. Very good. And when the batteries started falling from the sky, what was catching them? These living, talking barrels. Good. Now, the next word that I gave you was a board. That means that we have to somehow connect this story to include a board. How are we going to do that? Well, I'm going to imagine that because the barrels are alive, they're going to run to the top of a hill and they're going to throw themselves off the top of a hill with all the batteries because they feel like they're stealing it or something. I don't know. So the barrels are getting on top of a surfboard. Yeah, let's call it a surfboard, okay? So we have that board and they're going to slide off a giant hill. So let me repeat that. The barrels that have the batteries inside and they're alive, they're like magically alive, I don't know how, they're getting on top of a board and they're going to throw themselves off a giant cliff. Okay, that's the next part of the story. So what is the next word? The next word is diamonds. So how are we going to connect diamonds, right? The story's getting a little bit more complicated. It's like, oh, wow, okay. Let me see how I can continue the story. How can I add diamonds into this? So what I visualize is that when the barrels throw themselves off from the cliff, they're like yelling like, oh, like they're in a roller coaster almost, and all the, batteries are falling off a little bit. But when they reach the bottom, it explodes into a giant explosion and it turns all the batteries into diamonds in this massive, over-the-top explosion. So that's what I visualize. All these diamonds exploding at the bottom of the cliff. Okay, what is the next word? The next word is Sir Lancelot. So how are we going to add him to the story? Well, very simple. Everyone's already running because these batteries are falling from the sky. So we can imagine that Sir Lancelot, the knight, we can imagine that a piece of diamond from the explosion flew and it hit him in the head. So visualize that with me, because again, I'm going to test you at the end. So a giant piece of diamond hit him in the head and it knocked him out cold. Sir Lancelot is sleeping right now. He's completely knocked out. Good. So now we have, the fire hydrant is connected to the balloons, and then we have the batteries, and then the batteries fall on what? The barrels, and then the barrels, they use what to fall off the cliff? The surfing board, right? And then when the surfing board reaches the bottom, what happens? It explodes into what? Diamonds. Very good. And then the diamond hits Sir Lancelot in the head. He falls over, and the next word is a mask. Okay, so we need to somehow connect the mask to the story. So I imagine that Sir Lancelot is passed out, and you start running towards him. You're like, Sir Lancelot, I'm going to save you, right? And then you get near him, and out of your pocket, you're going to give him like an oxygen mask so that he can breathe, right? Because he needs your help. He just got knocked out by a diamond. So when you reach out to give him the mask, the next word that we have to memorize is toothpaste. So what I imagine is that when I take out the mask is like dirty. The only thing you have to clean the mask is toothpaste. So you reach out for toothpaste and you start cleaning the mask with the toothpaste and you put it on him. Okay, so that's 3 words that we connected there. We have Sir Lancelot, and then we ran to give him a mask, and then we had to clean the mask, so we use toothpaste. And you really need to visually see yourself, like really clean the mask. Don't just think, that you know the image. You have to participate in your mind. Like, yeah, I'm actually cleaning it, like in your mind. That's the only way you will be able to memorize it. Okay, so the last word is a sign. So, okay, how do we end this story? I don't know. Let's just add maybe some type of sign in the back that says Memory Mysteries. Like imagine a giant poster that says Memory Mysteries. and that's a sign. And then maybe the sign just falls over and it falls on top of him and it crushes him and it ends his life anyway. And that's it. That's the end of the story. So let's quickly review this crazy story we made. Again, it took us a minute to explain the concept. That's okay. I know this class was a little bit long. But now that you know the principle, you will be able to do it a lot faster. And to memorize a list of 10 words, it should take you just a few minutes. It's very, very short. It would take me like a minute or two to come up with this story. I'll be like, okay, fire hydrant, and then I'll wrap a balloon on it, and then the batteries, and then I go crazy fast with these stories. So let's review since we're starting. What was the first thing that you saw? The fire hydrant, right? What was it tied to? The balloons. Very good. The helium balloons there. What was inside of the balloons? What was the next word? The batteries. Very good. And what did the batteries fall on? The barrels. Very good. And they were alive, right? And what did they do after? They got on top of what? A surfboard. Exactly. Very good. And so what happened when they slid off the hill and it exploded, right? It exploded into what? Diamonds. Very good. And then one diamond flew off and it hit who? Sir Lancelot. Very good. And then he got knocked out and you went to help him. And what did you use to help him? A mask. Very good. But it was dirty. So what did you use to clean it with? Toothpaste. Very good. And then at the end of the story, there was a sign, a big giant sign, and it just fell on top of him anyway. The end. That's the story.
Alrighty, so I am back. You've made it to the end of the episode. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you got value out of this episode. And if you did like this episode, please leave a like. Make sure that you're subscribed. And if you think that a friend of yours or someone that you know can also get value out of this, please be sure to share this with them. And if you want to take your memory to the next level, be sure to check out my book, Memory Mysteries, and my program with the same name, Memory Mysteries, is a 30-day program to skyrocket your ability to memorize and learn anything that you want in record time. This is phenomenal for students. This is absolutely amazing also for people who want to learn languages faster. You are going to love it because this is a skill that you can use for the rest of your life. Alrighty, that's it from me. Thank you once again for joining me in Mind Mysteries. I'll see you in the next episode.